Gina Virginia Casella and the Dragon Dreams Soul Tribe Collective are pleased to welcome Brian Ruhe. Brian is a Buddhist monk and teacher based in Vancouver, BC, who has imparted Buddhist teachings since 1996. He was raised in a Unitarian household where his spiritual journey began early and was further influenced by his studies in business and philosophy at Brock University. After an 8-year career in financial planning, he felt a spiritual void in his life, which led him to explore various spiritual paths. In 1991, he discovered Buddhism, which resonated with him due to its depth and wisdom. Following this revelation, he left the financial industry to pursue a more meaningful existence. Brian has all kinds of experience, from 6 months to 4 years, spending lots of time in many passionate places like the Tibetan Buddhist Center in Vermont, where he practiced and studied at numerous temples and meditation centers. This experience enabled him to begin teaching Westerners at meditation retreats. There's much to be said about Brian. In addition to his teachings on Buddhism, Brian Ruhe founded the Vancouver UFO Meetup on June 3, 2029. This group serves as a gathering for those interested in the realm of UFOs and extraterrestrial encounters. Brian aims to facilitate discussions, share insight, while exploring theories regarding these phenomena. Brian's goal is to create a welcoming community for both seasoned researchers and newcomers alike, encouraging respectful dialogue and diverse viewpoints. The meetup is part of the broader project, University Galacticus, which invites contributions from a variety of perspectives within UFOlogy. Ultimately, Brian strives to bridge the boundaries between different belief systems, aspiring to offer effective tools for individuals to govern their lives meaningfully, thereby fostering personal growth and communal change within an ever-evolving societal context. Gina Virginia Casella and the Dragon Dreams Soul Tribe Collective are pleased to welcome Brian Ruhe.
Hi there, Gina and everyone. Thanks for inviting me to the conference. I think this is the first live conference I've ever been on in my entire career, so it's an honor. Yeah, so Gina asked me to talk a bit about community. Gina and I first met around, it was 2002 with my meetup group. It's Vancouver UFO, preparing for contact. And Gina was living, like I'm in Vancouver, Canada, British Columbia, and Gina was in Chilliwack, which is about a 2-hour drive outside the city. So only went like once in person. So Gina was kind of part of, we have a cyber community. In the last couple of years, we're developing more of an in-person community. So we have about 1,200 members in our Vancouver UFO meetup, but most of them live outside of the city, like in the United States, because we started it was 2009, we began the meetup group and took a break for a while from 2017 to 19 and started again. So we were in person 2009 for the five years, but it's starting around 2019, 2020. We're more making videos on Zoom, so more of a cyber community. It's only in the last like year and a half we're trying to develop more in-person communities. So there's kind of the two aspects of it. There's online groups and in person. So in person, we're just still trying to develop it. Like we have kind of a small group. We've got a group that meets in downtown Vancouver on like every other Sunday at the library. So we get like, 8 or 10, or we just last Sunday we had 12 at a meeting. And because it's meetup, the whole nature of meetup is people come and go. Like they say, one third are coming, one third are going, one third stay. So I think there's like 2,000 different meetup groups in the Vancouver area. So people, they join like 15 different groups. They move around. There's a lot going on. Like in any big city, there's a lot going on. So people are distracted by all kinds of things. So it's it's slow going, developing a real sense of community. We have the downtown group in Vancouver, also in Coquitlam. This is a suburb of Vancouver, and the Grant Cameron lives close to there in Port Coquitlam. So he's probably Canada's most famous ufologist. He moved from Winnipeg, Manitoba, here to Vancouver just over a year ago. So he's a big part of our community. He gives a lot of talks. We're actually meeting in his house tomorrow. It'll be our third meetup right in his home, and we meet right at the Coquitlam Library as well. So we meet every 2 weeks in Coquitlam, every 2 weeks in Vancouver. So we're trying to develop this community. I guess in cyberspace, it's kind of not the same as meeting in person. Like we've had people for a few years who come on the Zooms and get to know them. They ask good intelligent questions, but when the video's over, they're somewhere in the United States. We're here, so it's nice having that connection. But I really value in-person meetings. I guess with this particular subject matter, like UFOs, aliens, it's also about consciousness, higher dimensional beings, higher dimensional consciousness, whether it's physical or non-physical, it's something uncertain. So it's obviously not a mainstream topic. So it's kind of thing that a lot of people, have a deep interest in this, but they don't discuss it with a lot of their friends or even their family. It's an interesting phenomenon. Because there's been a stigma, since like the 1940s or 50s, the government and media and academia turned against, UFOs and ufology, tried to make it something, a silly thing. So because of that stigma, people don't want to talk about it. So I had this experience with my best friend when I got involved with my UFO meetup in 2009. He told me about this amazing UFO sighting he had in 1986. So all those years he never told me because he just didn't want to discuss it. He thought I might think it's weird. But once I started UFO meetup, he knew it was obviously interested. They had this incredible sighting near Diamond Head in British Columbia. He was out on this deck sleeping, and then he saw this UFO moving around. He fell asleep, but still there an hour later. Quite an amazing sighting. So that shows, I was his best friend in the world, and he waits like 23 years to tell me about this experience. So that's, I guess, one of the obstacles, and also one of the need for a community, because like it says in our meetup group, you can read the description that this is a place where people can share their interests. It's a safe space where people can talk about their experiences. Like one person recently phoned me and said, could I talk about this incredible experience I had with an orb who came to me in my room, or is that okay? Do you think people would think that's weird? And I thought, no. I mean, this is what we do. This is what our meetup's all about. So we're planning on him giving a talk, It says, Gina has a note here. Add questions to the chat. Okay, I'll keep an eye on the chat. So there's a need for a community around this. It's not just UFOs or physical extraterrestrial aliens, but it's the whole phenomenon. It could be some type of higher dimensional phenomenon, conscious phenomenon. I'll just make a plug for the free study. This is the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Extraordinary Experiences. They did this study published in Beyond UFOs, and they did a survey of 4,350 people. Had various. Add your questions to Brian in the chat. We'll get them in the presentation. Yeah. So they interviewed thousands of people with a questionnaire of 600 or 700 questions, very thorough. And they found there's a commonality of experience. So their thesis, which I agree to, is that consciousness is fundamental to the universe, even before physical matter. And even in physics, they'll say like it's wave theory. There's basically waves even before you get to matter. So we're really talking about a consciousness phenomenon. And in their other publication here, greater reality. You see, this includes, you can see here, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, UFOs, spirits, prayers, remote viewing, hallucinogenic journey, non-human intelligence, and many other things. So we're developing a community around all of these things. So it's a safe place for people to meet, and you can join us in person in the Vancouver area or join us online. We're having an online Zoom an hour and a half from now, but I don't want to interfere with Gina's conference. But we do Zooms every couple of weeks. So, but I find it's difficult to develop community generally in our society because kind of the structure of community is broken down, say, since the 1950s. Like, used to be grandparents and children and grandchildren would live in the same town or same city, so the grandparents would be involved in raising the children. But now people sometimes move to another city to get a job. You can't fault them for that. So the family's fractured, and just meeting on Zoom's not the same thing. So it's just the whole structure of society is broken down community. And also, in the past, people might have been more connected to a church, but now people are less going to church. They're looking for other things. So it's like our society needs more structure to create community. And I'm 66. I'm retired now. I study how a lot of other retired people feel lonely. Sometimes they feel lonely as well. I live alone with my cat. But a lot of people, when they retire, they lose the community they had at their job, their office. So it's a real issue, building community, And so I appreciate when Gina suggested I talk about this. So I think it's really something to address. Maybe we can't solve it all in one meeting, but it's good to talk about it. Maybe people come up with ideas and think of ways to develop community where they are, or create a community or strengthen the community that they're in. And I think when we talk about community, we're really talking about something very human. People want connection. They want a place where they can explore ideas, ask questions, and feel that they're not alone. So this is especially true when it comes to subjects like UFOs, consciousness, and the possibility of other intelligence in the universe. So these topics challenge the normal worldview that many people grow up with. So because of that, many people who are interested in these subjects feel isolated, may not feel comfortable talking about the ideas with coworkers, family, or friends. So this is where community becomes important. So community provides a place where people can safely explore big questions, creates a space where curiosity is welcome. When I started organizing UFO meetups, I quickly discovered that meetings were not just about UFOs. They're about people finding each other. Many people who attend these meetings have been interested in the subject for years, sometimes decades, but they never had a place to talk about it openly. When they finally sit in a room with others who share that interest, something changes. People relax, they open up, they begin sharing ideas, experiences, books, and research. Conversations start that can never happen in everyday life. So this is the beginning of community. And one of the important lessons I've learned is that community grows through regular contact. Like I'm a Buddhist, and the Buddha said the Sangha, which is like community of monks, he said the Sangha should meet frequently in harmony and part in harmony. So the Buddha emphasized frequent meetings. So if people only meet once or twice a year, the connection remains weak. But when people meet like weekly, relationships start to form. So consistency is incredibly important. When people know that there will always be another meeting next week, they begin to see the group as something stable. It becomes part of the rhythm of their lives. Another key element is openness. In the UFO field, people come from many different perspectives. Some approach the subject scientifically, others come from a spiritual or conscious-based perspective. Some people have had personal experiences they cannot easily explain. In fact, one woman that came to one of our meetups, there's about 10 of us a few months ago, she lives in Richmond, and she had this incredible experience about 20 years ago. She was interviewing Dorothy Isett. She worked for the Richmond newspaper, and Dorothy Isett was quite famous. She's passed away now, but she would get a sense UFOs were coming. She would film them, and you can see YouTube videos of Dorothy Isaac. She was world famous. So Cynthia, our friend in the meetup, she went to visit her. Later, she had this incredible UFO experience in Richmond. She saw something like the size of 5 buses in the sky, and she was very depressed at that time, had a lot of personal problems, but she had this powerful feeling coming from the UFO that everything would be okay. It changed her mood, it turned her around, so she cheered up, but she hardly discussed this with anyone for 20 years. So came to her meetup, shared this experience, but she never came back. She just wanted to release it. So that's one benefit a UFO community provides. It gives a place to be heard because she was in a safe environment. We're all quite interested and sincere to listen to what she had to say. So, and that doesn't mean that everyone has to agree. In fact, disagreement can be healthy. What matters is that the conversation remains respectful and curious rather than dismissive or hostile. A good community encourages people to listen as well as speak. Another important principle is participation. A strong community is not built around one person speaking while everyone else listens. Instead, it becomes a conversation. When people feel invited to ask questions, share ideas, and contribute their own knowledge, they begin to feel they're a part of something larger. Over time, the group becomes a network of individuals who support each other in learning and exploration. So something interesting also happens when communities grow. People begin to bring in new information and new perspectives. Someone may recommend a book, another person may share a documentary, someone else might introduce a new research angle or a personal experience that sparks discussion. The community becomes a kind of living classroom. So instead of learning only from experts or authors, people learn from each other. So in the UFO subject, this is particularly important because the field is still evolving. Most of the answers are still not yet clear. Like nobody knows the whole picture. We're all, in a sense, explorers trying to understand a mystery that is larger than any one person. And certainly I believe the government doesn't know the whole story. So community allows that exploration to happen collectively. Another important aspect of community is trust. Trust takes time to develop. People need to feel that they can speak without being ridiculed or dismissed. When that atmosphere exists, people sometimes share very personal experiences, like the one I mentioned before. They share sightings, encounters, or strange events that they've never spoken about before. When a community listens respectfully to those stories, it creates a powerful sense of belonging. People realize they are not alone. Over time, something else begins to happen. The community develops its own culture. Inside jokes appear, friendships form. People get to meet outside the meetings. Some collaborate on projects, research, or media. The group becomes more than just a monthly meeting or a weekly meeting. It becomes a network of relationships. So in today's world, this kind of connection is more important than ever. Many people feel increasingly isolated. Technology allows us to communicate online, but it does not always replace the experience of sitting together in the same room and having a real conversation. That's real. People still want that. So face-to-face gatherings create a kind of energy that is difficult to replicate online. This is why local meetups remain valuable even in the age of the internet. Online information can introduce people to the subject, but community helps people explore it together. One of the most encouraging things I've seen is how quickly people respond when a space for community is created. Often there are far more interested people than we realize. I think, half the population or more believes UFOs and ETs are a real phenomenon, and they're here. They're simply waiting for a place where they can connect. You think in a city as big as Vancouver, about 2 million people, Greater Vancouver, get like 10 people at a meeting. Where is everybody? There should be more people. I guess, most people haven't heard of us, haven't found us, or maybe some people are shy to talk. But once a place exists, the community begins to grow naturally. People invite friends, speakers are invited to share their work, discussion deepens, and gradually a network forms. UFO mystery itself may still be unfolding, but one thing is clear, we're not meant to explore it alone. Community allows us to approach the mystery together. It allows curiosity to replace isolation. It allows conversation to replace silence. And in the process, people discovered that the search for understanding is not just about UFOs or extraterrestrial intelligence. It's also about human connection, shared exploration, and the joy of discovering new ideas together. So that's the real power of community. Um, in the end, building community is not complicated. It begins with a simple idea: create a place where people can gather together, share ideas, explore questions together. And like we meet in libraries, back in 2009, we met in a co-op meeting room. We typically had about 20 people at meetings. It became the real UFO scene. What's significant is 6 days before my first meetup on May 28, 2009, I saw a UFO. It was 11:30 at night. I was just walking home. I stopped at the train tracks looking at the lights of the city of Vancouver. And something caught my eye. It was a small object going by about 200 feet away. Looked like a small spherical ball. I saw for about 10 seconds, but it was scattered clouds, so I couldn't definitely see the outline, but it looked roughly spherical. And no light, no sound, didn't reflect any light. So what could it be? So later I talked to Grant Cameron about this, Canada's best known ufologist. And he said, well, if you see in a UFO, you're part of the game. So I think that was kind of a signal from the ETs. So you're starting this meetup in 6 days, and it became an instant success. It became the scene in Vancouver for several years. So I think the ETs knew we were forming this community. It was just like saying hi. So I think they're significant to the timing of that. So the UFO mystery is one of the great unanswered questions of our time, but exploring it becomes much more meaningful when we do it together rather than alone. So when people come together with curiosity and respect, something powerful happens. A group forms, conversations grow, and gradually a real community emerges. So that is what makes meetups so valuable. They remind us that exploration is not just about information, it's about people connecting with each other in the search for understanding. So community is how we turn curiosity into shared discovery. Should we have, I just want to check, Gina, should we have questions now, or do you want me to keep talking?
Yes, yeah, so far this is phenomenal. I'm soaking in all of this information, Brian. I'm wondering, do you have more of your presentation? Because we can do the Q&A when you're finished.
Well, I could talk a bit more, like sort of a bit more of my thesis, like where's the community going? How is it developing? I think the ETs all over the world are trying to, raise consciousness or bring this into humanity's conscious gradually. So I think the growth of UFO communities around the world is kind of encouraged or influenced behind the scenes by the ETs themselves. I think this has happened gradually since around the year 1850. This is stated in Susie Hanson's videos. I always like to promote her work. She's kind of my highest influence on the culture society of the gray ETs. And she's got a YouTube channel, Suzanne Hanson. I've seen all of her 65 videos. But I think she says around 1850, they kind of came, not that they've ever left. I think they've always been here, but they initiated change around that time. And in 1848 was the beginning of the spiritualist movement in the United States with the Fox sisters. So spiritualism became a thing, and spiritualist communities began to grow. So the theory is that the ETs, like the Greys, are the main interface with humanity. The ETs that people see the most are the Greys, but they're believed to be led by the Mantis. I believe Mantis are like 7 or 8 foot tall. They look similar to the praying mantis. They're like the architects, and the Greys are like emissaries or technicians doing the work. But it seems they started to create spiritualist communities, and then they brought changes to our society. So what Susie and others described, they've been on these city-sized UFO motherships. They'd be brought inside, and there'd be lecture halls holding about 250 people, and people from Earth would be brought up in real time, and in a sense abducted or in a semi-conscious state. Some would be like engineers or scientists and inventors, and the mantis could put thought packages in their subconscious mind, which could be released later as inventions. This sounds quite far out, but I think this is actually the case. Actually, uh, believe this. A lot of developments in society, not just technically with inventions, but even social changes may have been initiated by them. So a whole structure of our communities and the change of our communities may have been initiated by extraterrestrials. I think they want to be behind the scenes. They're making these changes behind the scenes. They don't want to um, show themselves overtly because I think it's true that humanity can't handle the truth. It'd be too shocking. Like half the world's population, say, is Christian and Muslims. To tell them the truth may be that the nature is reality. So we have higher dimensional beings and their consciousness interfaces with ours, and the way humanity is going in the spiritual direction of humanity is they're they're hybridizing humanity for us to gradually be more like them. Like we're going to gradually take on what's called quantum dimensional consciousness of higher realms. So have more of a spiritual orientation of life, and our DNA will gradually change. So I think this is actually what's coming on. So I think that reality is too shocking to tell humanity that it's not about Jesus Christ or the Christian God or Allah, but it's actually these extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings, or whatever you call them. That's actually the spiritual guidance of humanity. That's why it has to be done gradually and behind the scenes. So I think it's fine for little people like us to tell the whole truth or whatever we know, but it wouldn't be appropriate for heads of government and state to come out tomorrow and disclose everything, because that'd be too disrupting to our communities worldwide. So I used to be totally in favor of full UFO disclosure. Now I'm more conservative. There was a study done on some institute. They brought in all these top minds and intellects, and they felt, well, we should have disclosure. And then after a few days, the meetings had 64 reasons why they shouldn't have disclosure. One is it'd be upsetting to society and to religions. Also, mainstream science and the mainstream scientific thinking of just plain materialism. There's nothing but materialism. You don't really have a soul. When you die, that's it. There's no spirit. Even they would be shocked to know that really the nature of reality and the universe is more about consciousness. And we're in kind of a lower third dimensional consciousness. Of these higher dimensions are reality that are influencing us. Even mainstream scientists would be freaked out, thinking, they spent $50,000 a year getting a degree at MIT. That it's not valid. So that's part of the larger effect on community, I think, by the extraterrestrial reality. So I am optimistic about the future. I think we're going through a process. It's like when you clean a turkey pan, it gets the water gets dirtier before it gets cleaner. So we no longer have the stability, say, society had back in the 1950s. We're going through a process right now. So there's perhaps a lot of loneliness, a lot of lack of community. But I think where it's going is we're probably being led to more of a telepathic society, which is a much stronger sense of community and connection. So one of the hallmarks of the aliens, everyone says they're telepathic. People have been experiencers on the craft saying the ETs telepathically communicate with them, and humans on craft communicate with each other telepathically as well. No one's speaking like with words through air. So one of the hallmarks of the Greys, they work together, kind of like a community mind, a group mind, a real sense of purpose of trying to benefit humanity, develop humanity, so that they have basically a telepathic society. So they're not lonely and isolated in their little box. Like here, say in the Western world, a lot of lonely people, they might be middle class or wealthy, but they're in their little box. Whereas in other cultures, people are outside more. They have a stronger sense of community or religion or whatever it is. But with a telepathic society, the ETs are closer. They're communal. So I think what they're developing in us could be over a period of centuries. It's already been like since 1850. I think they've been gradually changing us. This process could take another century or several centuries. But I think where this is going is human beings in the future will have a stronger sense of community because we'll develop a telepathic society. I think that's where it's going to go. So like the gray ETs and other ETs, they can't physically live on this planet because we have a particular climate, microorganisms, gravity, atmospheres. So our physical bodies are suited to this planet. So I think they're hybridizing us in the future to continue to look pretty much like human beings, but our consciousness and mind would be more like um, an extraterrestrial mind, or uh, a combination of several ETs, not just the Greys. There's what's called advanced humans, whether you call them Arcturians or Palladians or whatever, the advanced human types. But I think the future human on Earth will be a combination of these ET races in their consciousness in this kind of human form. And DNA is very much at the heart of this. Like I was reading one source saying that DNA is consciousness. We have a kind of our physical DNA, and there's kind of ethereal 5-dimensional DNA that leaves the body at death and then takes rebirth. And DNA can change. Many experiences been on craft said that the DNA was altered through light and through sound. They would hear sound or vibration and light, but it can actually affect the DNA and change the DNA. So I think this is very much at the heart of it. The ETs, they're master geneticists, and they can mix and match. And I think the mantids bring life across the galaxy, or one experience said across the whole universe. So I think DNA is their thing, and hybrids they can take from Earth and move them to other planets that are suitable. Like this type of hybrid might be good for this planet, that planet. But just as far as our own planet goes, I think we've been going through this hybridization process um, um, for decades, and it's not something I think would show up in a DNA test like 23andMe. It wouldn't show up there. It's something um, more mysterious, but things might get worse before they get better. There could be all kinds of problems and wars like we have now. But I think within a century or at some point, I think we'll have a much better world, a much happier world, and perhaps more idealistic society. So Gina's back. Do you want to have Q&A now?
Wow, Brian, that was such a. Oh, Brian, can you pause yourself because, or mute yourself because there's an echo? Yeah, just hit the mute
That's
button.
off.
When you're talking, I have to mute. When I'm talking, you have to mute. So thank you, Brian, for such a heartfelt presentation, well-rounded. And I feel proud of you because I know you're used to hosting, and so to come on and actually be in the position of guest, and then I feel like you could have kept talking, like you really could have. You were just starting to get passionate, right? And Brian loves talking about the ET agenda, and definitely opened up a can of worms. I have tons of questions. There's questions in the chat too. Um, you made me think about Homo Illuminus and the next stages in our development. Your comments about changing DNA. Like, I don't have a science background, but in my own dream life, there's quite the power with light. Just putting light over seeds that are trying to grow, you can manipulate the growth, positive or negative. So it would make sense to me that you could manipulate the DNA with light. And I never thought about something like that. This business of community, I can't say enough about it. Can you talk a little bit about the dragons and the nagas, and just how there's a connection, because there's so many different, I don't know if hierarchy is the right word to use, but there's different spirits and devas, and somehow the dragons fit into this. And I myself personally, I don't get hung up on categories, but Brian has a Buddhist background, and he just in general has a background in this kind of knowledge. And so can you speak a little bit to that, Brian? Dragons and nagas. I know you mentioned that before, and I'll just hang out here with you on this stage, and I'll pause myself here or mute myself.
Yeah, we definitely have dragons in Buddhist cosmology. The Buddha had quite a sophisticated cosmology. He describes 31 planes of existence. We're in the human realm, and above us there's what's called the God realm, the heavenly realm, and there's 6 sensuous heavens, like sort of an order of height or hierarchy. Like lower heavens can't see the higher heavens. And the first heaven is called the heaven of the 4 great kings, and there's several types of devas, Deva is a term for angels that inhabit it. And one is called the Naga. And this Naga is a serpent-like or snake-like being. It's often it's described as a shapeshifter, like Buddha said. One of the hallmarks of the Devas generally is that they're shapeshifters, and they like water, so they've been seen in bodies of water. Like perhaps the most famous one is the Loch Ness monster. So Buddhists regard that as a Naga. They never manage to catch it, so it can physically appear in the water. People see it, but then it can um, shapeshift back to its Deva angelic form and go back up to the first heaven of the centrosphere and come back. And here in British Columbia, we have Okanagan Lake, and the Ogopogo monster has been seen by over a century from native Indians and others. And there's throughout history, 1,000 lakes in China that have seen these things, even in the Atlantic Ocean since like the 1400s up to World War One. European sailors have seen these sea serpents. They say it was like a snake-shaped shape with a head like a dog or a snake. So from Buddhist view, this is quite straightforward. These are Nagas. So like dragons in European history could be the same thing. Could be Nagas. So this is something distinguished from reptilians. I made a mistake before. I thought, well, maybe this explains the negative reptilians we hear about in ufology. But I did a video with Ajahn Punadamo. He's in Northern Ontario, one of our senior monks near Thunder Bay. And he said, no, Nagas as a rule, they don't interfere with human affairs. They might be a bit haughty, but they don't attack humans or interfere. So I think the reptilians is something different. It could be native to Earth, like reptarians, or it could be a negative type of ET. I think there's good reptilians and negative reptilians. So I think the negative reptilians describe a lot of the sort of negative, higher elite political forces behind the scenes, which is behind war, the idea they want to feed off of negative energy. But the dragons are generally good. The Nagas are quite good beings, so they definitely exist. So I just want to support Gina with her dragon dreams, because this is a real phenomenon. These are real beings from my view, from a Theravada Buddhist view as well.
Yes, thank you, Brian, for saying all of that. Because in my dream world, the dragons they look like dragons, like any old dragon that you might imagine, but they also look like a bunch of worms and sperms and primordial binary fields. Okay, so Julia asked a question earlier about the movies, and it kind of goes with mine. Oh, Brian, you got to mute yourself. I know. When I first started using StreamYard, I could not figure out for the life of me this echo business. And then I realized, oh, okay, we have to mute each other. Okay, so my question is part of one of Julia's questions. So when I think about community and how we express ourselves and share stories, we have to tiptoe around things because it might not be safe, it might not be well presented. And this is, frustrating, and why community is important. So community, we do things like share stories, and we do that orally, like you just did now. But we also share stories in other ways, like dancing, non-verbally, through art or music. And another really popular way to share story medicine is through movies. So I'm transforming all my content into a movie series. But what are your thoughts about some of the disclosure ET type movies that are out there? Do you feel like those are like it's a good idea to do that? Or are we maybe perhaps telling people what to think, putting ideas in people's heads a little bit too much? I feel like when people talk about ET movies, they tend to cling to that information. And I forget the name. I think it's called Disclosure by Steven Spielberg. I'm just scrolling back here through the chat. But what are your thoughts about ET movies, basically, and big blockbuster folks like Steven Spielberg? What are the pros and cons? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I was at a potluck party recently with 10 people, and I was talking with this fellow David about my interests in extraterrestrials. So he was quoting all these UFO movies he's seen, like Independence Day and others we want to talk about. So I think for the general public, that's often their their interface with the idea of ETs through movies. So there can be some good ones that are helpful. Like for instance, Star Trek, the very first Star Trek pilot episode, it was filmed in 1964, and they had gray aliens in it. In the show, they're called Telosians, had the big gray heads, and they captured Captain Christopher Pike, and they're interested in creating genetic hybrids, him with the human woman, to create a new human race, and they had paralysis devices, which people have actual experiences have found. Sometimes the gray aliens hold a little device, and then it can paralyze people. And they also had telepathy and other things we know about the gray aliens. But in 1964, virtually nothing was known publicly about the Greys. Like the Betty and Barney Hill book about their encounter with the Greys didn't come out until 1966. So it's believed that Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek, he had a relationship with the Council of Nine. We have a mutual friend, Eric Husmus, who does the Council of Nine. But he was with this group in the 1950s, a psychic channeling group. And so there's probably U.S. intelligence connections, we know for sure, to Hollywood. So they might have influenced Star Trek, particularly that first pilot episode. Like a lot of the other ones weren't so much about what we know about ETs, although some did discuss UFOs. So I think it's a good thing. It's intentional. It's done, I think, initiated perhaps by the ETs themselves, have a relationship with our intelligence agencies like the CIA. Like the CIA admitted that the 1951 movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, was initiated by the CIA because they want to see, how would the world react if these aliens landed in Washington, D.C. and came out. And it had a peaceful message for mankind. And Steven Spielberg's movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think from like 1977, that was based upon a real secret film, an encounter that the Americans actually had with aliens. They gave this inside information to Steven Spielberg, and the movie was based upon a real event projected as fiction. So I think that movie was very helpful in opening people's minds to a positive impression of the ETs, particularly the Greys and that. So this is how you enter in the mass conscious. Movies that reach hundreds of millions of people, or even a billion people, like blockbuster big movies, reach a lot more people than our videos on YouTube. So some of them are quite helpful. Of course, some of them are harmful, like Independence Day. All these evil aliens are coming to take over the world, and we have to destroy them. So there's lots of negative movies about how negative, especially like 1950s B movies or 1960s B movies. So one of the motive behind that, I have this theory that the negative reptilians, since they control our media and governments and maybe Hollywood, they're creating these negative movies to give a bad reputation to the good ETs, to give a bad reputation to the Greys. So I think there's good and bad forces playing themselves out in movies and in media generally, but there's been some quite good ones.
Wow, that was a great answer. It seems like the ETs are also caught up in this triangle of disempowerment. There's the good guy, the bad guy, the victim. We just really got to break away from this. And for what it's worth, somebody reported me about a year ago, and I had to put a disclaimer saying that all my content is entertainment, and it really troubled me at first, especially because I wasn't even sharing out half of the extreme that others are sharing. So somebody probably just didn't like me or whatever, and reported me, but I didn't have a choice but to respond to it. And the beauty about that is it actually made space now. So thank you to whoever or whoever's reported me, because now, like the movies, I don't have to worry about whether people believe me or not. This is just watch it, don't watch it, take it in, don't take it in. Something that you said too, it went back to my presentation that I did earlier. Brian was simultaneously hosting his meetup group when I was presenting, but I talked about the Gnome King. And the Gnome King, he basically expressed to me that some secrets are safe for keeping. It's not safe to just, tell everybody where the ETs are located. It's not safe to let everybody know the locations of the goddesses who are hiding in the wells and that kind of stuff. it's like the Little Mermaid, basically. You can't just jeopardize the whole species because some are already, like there's safety here. But it really begs the question, like, who gets to decide? How is it decided? How much information gets released? And what happens in the meantime? We're just left to feel like we're losing our mind, because mental health is a real thing. And we have a serious mental health crisis here in North America. And so I think about all of the vulnerability with the ET agenda, because people are looking to belong. They want to cling to these stories. And for me, it just opens up a can of worms. What are your thoughts on secrets that are safe for keeping, and this business of who gets to decide and when? Like, um, why are we waiting for the CIA? You know what I mean? And then I'll go back to the chat here. We still got a good 13-ish minutes or so. So let's soak up all Brian's story medicine while we can. Thanks, Brian.
So I can answer that now, right? Um, yeah. First of all, I also want to mention the movie Arrival about 10 years ago. That was a really nice E.T. movie as well. Yeah, as for who gets to decide, there was a video Jeff Selver was hosting, Susie Hansen. He's an experiencer with his book, The Rising, who I know here in Vancouver. And he was hosting Susie Hansen. And Jennifer in Manitoba asked some questions. Do you think the ETs decide on disclosure, or is it the government, or something else, or a combination of two? And Jeff Selver said, well, I think it's a combination of the two. But Susie says, as far as I'm concerned, the ETs decide. So that's my view. I think Susie's got a lot of experience in contact with the Greys. So I think actually the ETs decide. Interesting, there's a video of President Barack Obama. He was on a talk show at night, like a comedy kind of humor show, and they asked him, what about the ETs? And he said, Barack Obama says, oh, they don't like us talking about them. They keep us well under control. So he was kind of joking, but I think that's exactly the truth. I think the ETs really have this in hand. I think President Truman in 1947 created Majestic 12 to deal with ET problems. So it's above the democratic government. So you could say in 1947, when this changed, in a way, the United States became a dictatorship, that this ET group, whether it's Majestic 12 or something within the CIA, they have a separate power and budget above the government. I think this is because the ETs want to gradually roll out disclosure the way they think is wisest. So yeah, when you ask the question who to decide, I think the ETs decide. But I did a video months ago. One woman was giving me a good analogy. Like around 1600, the Catholic Church decided humanity can't handle the truth that the world is actually round. And with Copernicus, so they felt they had to do the right thing and protect society. So then Copernicus was burned at the stake, and they persecuted Galileo because they thought humanity can't handle the truth. But with the Enlightenment, we found out, well, people did handle the truth. It was no big deal. So there's a good argument to be made. Well, if they did give us disclosure, maybe we could handle it. Maybe religions would adapt. They would get used to it, and life would carry on. And most of the world's population think ETs and UFOs exist anyway. So I'm kind of uncertain about this. I trust in the wisdom of the Mantids and the Greys. If they think it's got to go gradually, my idea is just to defer to their wisdom, because I'm just a human being. I don't claim to be that wise. I'm thinking of myself as a normal human being. So I like to defer to wiser people. Like within Buddhism, I defer to the elder monks. Like I'm not a monk anymore. I'm a lay Buddhist, so I defer to monks. So that's my spiritual inclination, is to defer to wiser people. But it's an uncertain thing whether we should have disclosure or not. People have different views about it. So I'm interested in other people's views on it or not. I can't say I really know the truth.
And it's humble of you to say that, like somebody could be listening to you right now and be like, no, it's not true. That's not the information. But it's like, well, who really knows anything? Nobody knows anything. And I don't think there's just one all be all ET group. I think there's all kinds, different levels going on here. We have about 9 minutes left. Let's try and get through these other questions. Is Brian aware of DUMB, DUMB, Deep Underground Military Bases in Canada? Any familiarity with that, Brian?
Oh yeah, I've been involved in ufology deeply the last 20 years, studying it for like 3,000 hours. So yeah, definitely heard about deep underground military bases. I believe it's true. There's a few like in in the United States, like Dulce Base and others in the Midwest, which I'm convinced are there. And there's been encounters of people who've worked there, or experiences, or people have been there or escaped from there. Um, uh, I'm not aware of what's going on in Canada, though. But I think it's a real thing. So I think some are man-made, and some are extraterrestrial made, and some are kind of a combination of both, where the ETs allow humans to work with them. For instance, Mount Hayes, Alaska, is a mountain. In 1975, CIA remote viewer Pat Price, he remote viewed it along with three other mountains, and he said there's extraterrestrials working there, and they're working together with Americans. And that was in 1975. So I believe that's true, because Pat Price, he was an excellent remote viewer. He was one of the very best, had a very good reputation. Yeah, so I think it's definitely a real thing, but I'm not so certain, like, what are they doing in there? I think the ETs themselves have bases underwater, underground, in mountains, but what are the governments doing in underground bases? Yeah, I don't know. It's quite a mysterious, quite an important question.
Fair enough, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking about politics and religion and this and that. And ultimately, when the ETs come to collect the people meat, politics are going to be pretty inconsequential, right? So it's like, it just, all we can do is really promote this exact kind of conversation, the Dragon Dream Soul Tribe Collective, because how many people out there are having these experiences and they don't have anybody like this to talk to, and they're being persecuted within their own communities. I belonged to a group a few years ago, and somebody got very emotional because they had a family member who ended up in the insane asylum, forced to take medication. They were even beaten up because they thought they were going to beat up like the spirit to get out of them, when really it's like, oh my God, this person had probably some kind of ET encounter. And how is that, just like people who have Bigfoot sightings, or people who, we could talk all day about Bigfoot, but when you have a child that is unaccounted for and somebody's telling a Bigfoot story, for example, like, what do we do with that? Oh, well, we'll just leave people to think that they're losing their mind. So these conversations are important, and the people who need to hear this the most are probably not hearing it. So please make sure you share this with everybody. We've got about 6 more minutes with Brian. I don't want to be a stickler about the schedule. Time is an illusion, but not to the biological ones, right? And not to the biological ones. So thank you to everybody who subscribed to my YouTube. We're at the 400 subscribers mark. Keep the subscriptions coming, because I want to get that super chat going. Brian, there was another question here about clones. It's too easy for us to slip into timelessness, but this will be our last question for you. And of course, you can connect with Brian as well. We got his link there in the chat. What does Brian feel about clones on the planet?
I think there's hybrids living on the planet. I don't know about clones. Like, I think the gray ETs, they normally clone themselves. Like, if you look at the gray ETs, they have big heads, skinny bodies, no genitals, so they don't give birth in the way that humans do. So I think they clone themselves, and they can clone many different varieties of grays for different bodies. So I think cloning is the common way that the grays reproduce themselves. I'm not sure about other types of ETs, like the human types. They might have normal sexual reproduction. So as for clones on the planet, I think some gray ETs could be on the planet. For instance, in the 1950s, Bill Uhos was an engineer working at Area 51, and he said he had a working relationship they did with a gray by the name of Axelrod, who was there to help them with engineering questions to back engineer UFOs. They weren't to discuss anything about the nature of the universe or history or spirituality, just engineering questions. So that was in the 1950s. Another witness came forward in 1960s from Area 51 said he also worked with the same grade name, J. Rod. So I think those type of clones are on the planet. I think they've had a working relationship with the government since that time. Yeah, I guess that's my answer.
Clones is just another can of worms, what is a clone? A replica, right? And my understanding is that the problem with clones is that you just can't beat the original no matter what you do. So the copy, even though it's an original copy, the cells just don't hold together. And we see this with the cloning of the great trees. There was a man, I'm brain burning it out here, Rob Robinson, something like that, who he was committed to planting trees and cloning trees. And then I just started connecting it to ET cloning type stories, because my understanding is the more you clone, and it seems like the ETs are like past the point of no return with their cloning because they're desperate to clone. But the problem is the cells just aren't holding the form. And so that's why we're so important, because our biological forms can hold the formulas. And the intention is that they're going to plug in their DNA into us and then basically weed us out. So it's just their DNA that's left within. And I just find this very fascinating. And in my dream life, book 8, it's called Scary Dreams. And I start talking about Lushers. Now, maybe in 40 years, I'll call them something else, but at this time, I'm calling them Lushers. And they don't even have bones and organs. They think they do. Well, that's the thing. They don't even know, because up here they've been reprogrammed and they're on drugs and stuff. They're very confused. But it's like they're made out of these fat body suits. Like, when people get surgery to have fat removed from their body? Well, it's like somebody took that fat, shape and molded a body with a cookie cutter, and then programmed it and called it a clone. And it's just like fascinating. And it's like, oh, top secret, because somebody in the hierarchy, power control hungry, knows about bones, knows about organs, and we have the bones, we have the organs. And so there's like protection on our planet. And somebody even told me that there's an entire clone universe of us that we're being tested on. So I don't know. Any final thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on what you said about the mental health crisis in the Western world. I think that's true, and I think part of this whole phenomenon is a conscious phenomenon. Like the consciousness of humanity is raising and changing, so it's going to create some disturbance. It could lead to some mental illness, some disturbance. And I've done channeling practice myself to try to connect with these higher realms. And I've had mental illness problems with myself, like getting unstable, not catching it, containing and grounding the energy enough. So I've had problems with that as well. So I think that's, like you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. I think it's part of the risk of raising consciousness just to deal with these higher dimensions or extraterrestrials or UFOs. It is something that challenges your everyday consciousness. So I think it's worth it. So sometimes we have to take some risk or experience mental changes or illness ourselves. So I'm sympathetic with people who feel that way. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. Every presenter, I feel like we could just keep going on. I'm so thankful for you, Brian. Thank you for being here and for talking about community. There's so many things Brian could have talked about, and he left it to me to give him something to talk about. And I was like, how about community? And then Brian did a phenomenal job. And I really appreciate you being here today, Brian. I'm just going to remove you from this stage. And Brian's information is in the chat. Anybody wants to connect with Brian more? I know I benefited from being part of Brian's meetup. Behind the scenes, Chris Latude, he is with us. Hi, Chris, welcome. We won't be able to hear you until I bring you to the stage. So it's 1:11. Happy 111, everybody. We're going to take our little break. So I've got Gemstone Insight, video 3 of number 6. And make sure that you're getting hydrated, eating snacks, going to the bathroom, doing what you got to do. At 1:30, I'm going to bring Chris Well, to this stage, we've got our lovely dreamy guitar music. Let me know if you're enjoying the dreamy guitar. Hi, Sonia, I see you there in the chat. And also the biographies, those little videos. That no tears were involved in the creating of those videos. It came close a number of times. No tears were involved. And thank you again, everybody, for tuning in with us. Let me bring our little break.